Good morning, everyone. This is the first 2025 meeting of the Senate Corporations Committee, and I'm pleased to be joined here by Senator Landon and Senator Bonner. We expect the other senators to come shortly. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll talk about committee protocol when we get more people here, but let's go ahead and hear from our Department of Insurance. Both bills are with regard to insurance. And Commissioner Root, if it's, please, both of you guys come up. And if it's not out of line, could you just give us a general background on your department and your mission and maybe some of the challenges that you're facing before we go to the specifics of the bill? It's off the cuff, and I appreciate it.
No, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to talk about my office anytime anyone's interested in it. We don't get it that often, but we'll take it when it comes. So that's a good thing. So I am Jeff Root. I'm the Commissioner of Insurance. With me is Ms. Tanahauer, my deputy. The Wyoming Department of Insurance, we're the smallest insurance department in the country. We have 27 members. But having said that, we still have to be competent and be able to enforce all the insurance laws and regulations that every state does. So even California, we just are very shallow in our depth when it comes to who knows what. We have a lot of one deep positions. And so when turnover comes, which is always a challenge, that is something that we struggle with, but that's just our very nature. We're a small state, we're a small government. That's part of what we do and who we are. We collect between fines, fees, and taxes. We bring in conservative estimate of $55 million a year to the general fund. We're an agency that
I think that's more than the Secretary of State, I might add.
So it has grown significantly, and part of that growth is due to the number of out-of-state agents that write policies in the state. We have, I think the last count is over 215, 218 agents and agencies that write policies in the state of Wyoming, which is outstanding. I mean, it's just a huge number, and obviously there's fees that accompany that. Our office, we do a little bit of everything. We do, one of our main missions is the financial examinations of our insurers to ensure they're solvent, to ensure that they have claims, money available to pay consumers. We license the agents. We discipline the agents if necessary. We take their license away if necessary, and we do a lot of these. Given the large number of agents out there, we do quite a few of these. Where we take the license away from them. They failed to, they lost their license for some reason in another state. They didn't report it. They failed to give us information on and disclose a felony, things like that. So we do investigations. We review every single insurance policy that's sold in the state. It comes to our office and we look to ensure compliance with Wyoming law. And we help consumers. And that's there's sort of this really tension but balance, if you will, between ensuring a healthy insurance market and helping consumers who are not taken advantage of by these very difficult to understand insurance contracts. And so we balance those two, and we help quite a few people, whether it's life and health or property and casualty. If they have any questions about what something means, my claim wasn't paid, I don't understand this, we're happy to help, and we take calls every day on that. So, some of the other challenges we're facing now, wildfire is a huge, huge concern. We've been fortunate in the States. So while we had a number of wildfires, a lot of it was over grasslands where there wasn't as significant of an insurance impact for claims as if it was in a populated area. We've all seen what can happen with a wildfire in, say, Boulder, for example, where it gets into a residential area. And so fire insurance is harder to get. It's more expensive with what's going on in California. We're going to see more of the same, that the cost of those fires is spread out nationally among the big insurers. And so I think we're going to see more increases in price and premiums. We still have a healthy market here. We still have enough people writing here for fire insurance. It's just whether it's not available. It is available. It's just whether it's affordable. That's really the key. That's just off the cuff. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Oh, I think that's excellent. Any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Commissioner, ultimately, we're all going to pay for these big disasters, are we not? You alluded to that just a moment ago, but that's going to be reflected in rates, right?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, absolutely, it will. They will spread them across the United States as they always do, as they have with hurricane claims on the East Coast, getting spread across the United States, or hail claims in the Midwest, or you know, those very bad wind storms that they get in the Midwest. But yes, and so I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I just don't.
And if, Senator Dockstader, this is Commissioner Jeff Root and Tanya Howard, she's Deputy Commissioner. And they're just, before we go to these two insurance bills, they were giving kind of a general overview of the challenges and the mission of their agency. And one thing I've noted is that the latest crisis in insurance is in the property and casualty market. It seems to be, and the commissioner had talked about his agency, but also about the wildfire risk, just as kind of you were coming in. But if anybody else has any questions, we good? All right, thank you very much. Well, we have two bills in front of us today. And with this very large crowd, I kind of expect there to be a lot of interaction. So the first one is Senate File 50, Insurance Holding Company Regulations Amendments.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'll be briefing that. We are asking to amend Chapter 44 of the Insurance Code, which deals with a holding company. And the easiest way to understand what a holding company is, it's just like 4 or 5 companies that are affiliated with one another. One might be a parent, one might be a subsidiary, one might own shares in the other and direct some of its, future in what decisions that they make. And so when you have a holding company that involves an insurance company also, when they're in that group, we want to have a look at all of the companies in that group because they can affect insurance. So by way of background, we adopted the initial Holding Company Act in '91. It was amended in 2013 and in 2019. These new amendments have been part of them were worked for the last 5 to 6 years, and the other part were worked longer than that. And by work, I mean meetings with the departments of insurance, the insurers themselves, and consumer advocacy groups where we come to an agreement with this bill, this language. And that's why some of the language might seem awkward at times, but that's because the insurers wanted it worded specifically this way because they had something in mind and we had something in mind, and this is the agreement we've come to on this. And so this is a bill that has been seen by all 50 states and was passed as a standard for us to consider, and that's why we're here before you today.
And
so,
Commissioner, if I could
sure.
Just interject. One aspect of these insurance bills is there's a great effort to have uniformity across the country. And the purpose of the uniformity really is to forestall federal regulation of insurance. And it's something that states are very sensitive about. Is at one time, it's been quite a while, but there was a movement to regulate insurance at the federal level. States push back on this. This is kind of the solution they've come up with, is to have a very active organization and have consistent laws across the country, so that these insurers, they have a natural tendency to maybe think, well, federal regulation might be better because at least we have one for the entire country and not 50 jurisdictions. So part of this is to try to have uniformity, and I hope I did justice to that.
Mr. Chairman, no, I appreciate that. I'll touch a little bit on it, but I appreciate that. That's a very important point.
And I might also, just one more housekeeping, with Senator Landon and Senator Boner coming back to the committee, I'd probably look for you guys to split up the two bills today. So be paying attention and have them for the majority. And you can work out which one you want to do. That's all right. Okay, back to you, Commissioner. I'll shut up.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And whoever gets whatever bill, we will be more than happy to give you what we got for notes and share with you our talking points. So this act really gives us a better oversight of these insurance groups. So we're really looking to prevent the improper siphoning of funds away from an insurer to another non-insurer, because we have to, insurance companies by their very nature are more liquid. They have more assets available to them. And it's tempting for another company that's affiliated to pull those assets away. And we want to be sure that they have sufficient assets to pay claims. And that's why we're looking at this. These changes and the entire Holding Company Act are an accreditation standard, and Senator Case touched a little bit on that, and I'll touch base on it also. The accreditation program actually was created in the early 90s. In the late 80s and throughout the 80s, there was a number of insurance companies that went under, and we had different state financial regulations in some of these in different states. And so the states got together with industry, and we sat down and we said, what standards are important for this financial regulation? What do you want the states, what should the states look to when they examine an insurer? And so we've come up with accreditation standards where industry supports them. We've talked, and they take, I previously mentioned, they take years and years to come up with an agreement on. And then all of the states, we vote on them, and we agree to have these uniform standards. So the real impetus is we pass these accreditation standards, and then the other states, for example, we have an insurer that sells in Montana and in Colorado also. When we're accredited, when we ensure these standards are met, Montana and Colorado can rely on our work, and they will not examine these companies for this. If we're not accredited, if we didn't enforce these standards, they would have to. And our exams are extensive, and they're costly and time consuming. And so these insurers only want one state to have to do it. And so they want accreditation standards to be passed, and they want us to enforce them. It's really interesting because as a regulator, they want us to have a competent office, a good office, a fully manned office that will actually take these standards and enforce them on them. Because if they don't, they know they're going to also get hit by other states. So.
Go ahead, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner, I'm sorry, I didn't really pick up, you used the example of Montana, Colorado, and they want us to be uniform and accredited. And what was the reasoning you gave on that? Let's just say that we're not accredited, and they are.
Absolutely. So
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon. So this one insurer, that's a domestic, we regulate them. You regulate the domestic insurers in your state. They also sell in Colorado and Montana. All of the states currently are accredited, all 50 states. We all have these same standards, and we're all looking at this Holding Company Act to be amended. If we don't do this and we don't enforce standards and we're no longer accredited, Montana will have to enforce these standards on this domestic, in addition to us doing our regular exam for what's on the books. So they're going to get examined twice.
Gotcha.
And what that means is they pay more money, it's more time, it's inefficient, and quite frankly, no insurer is going to come to an unaccredited state if they're going to sell in other states. They won't do it. It's too painful.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So.
Go ahead.
So let's see. And just briefly on that, we are examined to ensure that we meet these accreditation standards. So we receive accreditation every 5 years. This National Organization of Insurance Commissioners, which is really run and put together by all of the states, we'll have a team come into our office, and they will pull our exams to make sure they're done correctly. And they give us a report, and as long as we meet those standards, we're accredited. A lot of times there's some, hey, you can do a little better here, a little bit here, and that's fine. We appreciate the feedback, but we want to maintain that accreditation. We are examined just like the insurers are in that regard. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will pass and start going on the bill.
Committee? I think you can go ahead.
Okay. So starting on page 1, looking at the bill, you have the introduction describing the bill and the reference to a new section. On page 2, lines 2 to 10, we're dealing with the concept of a group capital calculation and the liquidity stress test. These are two terms you're going to hear throughout this bill. The group capital calculation is sort of like what it sounds like. We're going to look at the capital held by this group of businesses, not just the individual insurer. And the liquidity stress test is really just that. It's a stress test to see how many assets you have. And so we'll look to, a life insurance company and say, all right, this is what you think your claims are going to be, but let's run a model where maybe you have to pay out 30% more claims. What happens? And so that's the liquidity stress test. And so this section on page 2 at the beginning, it's really telling us what we can and cannot do with the information. And this is important to the insurers. They don't want, this is a tool for our office to look at these companies. It's nothing for the public to see. It's just a tool for us to assess these companies, their liquidity and their capital. So in lines 8 to 10, it talks about how we're just assessing risk. We're not going to use this as a means to rack and stack and rank any insurer one better than the other. It's just a tool. Lines 12 to 23, except as authorized in the next section, which we'll address, this information is not to be made public. It goes on to detail at the end of the page all of the very detailed, specific reasons why how the information won't be released, and they go to great length to name everything they could think of. And this was with input, like I said, from the insurers. They don't want the information published. So looking to page 3, lines 1 to 11, this further states the prohibitions on releasing the information. Lines 13 to 15, if somehow something is released, it shouldn't be, but if there's a prohibited release, the Department of Insurance, we can just say, for the record, we could publicize it. This was released, it's inaccurate, it's misleading. No one should use this for any decisions in the future as to whether, they don't want the stock price of an insurance company to go down or to go up or to be affected in any way. That gives us the opportunity just to say, this information shouldn't have been released, it's misleading. Line 17 on page 3, and then going into page 4, if the information is released but it's wrong, if it's materially false, the insurance department actually can go to the insurer and talk to them and say, do you want us to rebut this? We don't have to, but is it in your interest to say, something was released that says you're a company of this size and magnitude and it's inaccurate, you're much bigger. We'll release that for you if you want. And we could do that to correct the record if you want. So looking on to the next page, page 4, LSO reorganized and with the creation of a new section on lines 9 to 14. On line 20, this is the definition of a group capital calculation instruction. And the definition of the instruction is the instruction itself. This really allows for maybe a minor update in the following year without having to make some particular change, but that's how they define it. Going on to page 5, the NAIC liquidity stress test framework is defined. And it is the publication and the instructions that we put out. It includes historical information, the criteria of when an insurer has to provide the information, and instructions for the current year and various templates. On page 5, lines 12 to 17, this is the definition of scope criteria, which is really just setting out of who qualifies. So it could be the size of a company. If you meet this, if you're a company of, say, 10 billion or more, that's the criteria you've got to submit. And theoretically, that could change too, because we might find out, I mean, this is new, but we could find out in the next couple of years, we need to increase that number, or maybe we need to decrease it to include other companies. So, but the scope criteria is just that, who has to submit the information. On lines 19 to 23, it defines the third-party consultant designated by the commissioner. These are independent consultants that we hire to help us do this work, and it's a more accurate term than what was used before with affiliates, and you'll see us changing that later in the bill.
Okay.
Looking to page 6, line 2 and 3, we're renumbering and including a new section. Now, lines 5 through 17, that's currently in statute. So when an insurer is just doing their basic registration with our office, there's a section there that says, you only need to provide material information. For the liquidity stress test and the group capital calculation, we're taking them out of the context of what is material. Because a lot of this, like I said, it's a tool we're looking at. We don't want to get caught up in legal nuances of what is material or not. If we want some information, we think you should provide it. We don't want to argue with you about it. We just want it and to look at it. So it's a little bit different than when you're just registering your company. Lines 21 into the next page. Every insurer will have one person who's the ultimate person in control, and that makes sense. That's who will be responsible for this. And while there's more, oftentimes there could be more than one state insurance department involved, there ultimately will be a lead state commissioner. So there'll be one party on each end of this regulation of who's responsible for carrying it out.
And Commissioner, the word person there literally means person. Human being.
Mr. Chairman, in practice, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's- And lastly, the report itself is filed with the lead state commissioner. So if there's multiple commissioners involved, it's only filed with one commissioner.
And define lead state commissioner would be the one that houses the domestic where the company is, or how does that work?
It's Mr. Chairman, there's a little wiggle room there. I mean, theoretically, if we house the domestic, and we do, but another large state is also involved and they have the resources, I could allow them to do it. We're still involved in the process. It's still open communication between the states, but there's no set. State of domestication is probably the first default, but if, for example, we just didn't have the experts or the budget or anything like that, we could have another state do it with us looking over their shoulder, if you will.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, does the lead state commission, if they have that person, do they have any more leverage than anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, not leverage per se. They're the recipients of the information. There's decisions that will be made, but they'll be made in consultation with the other commissioner just to get their input. At some point, someone's got to make a decision. And when we get later on into this regulation, you'll see how a commissioner has the ability to actually not require certain information if it really isn't necessary. So someone's going to have to make that decision. They would consult with the other state, but ultimately one person would make that decision. And that would be the lead state commissioner.
Go ahead.
So on page 7, lines 13 to 14, it references the following holding companies that are exempt from filing this calculation. So really what this is, and some of the terminology here is new, and it's foreign to a lot of folks, including myself when I first read this. What we're doing is if the state commissioner, if the insurance department can get the information elsewhere, we're not going to bother the company to resubmit it. Okay. So for example, on lines 13 to 14, it references, on 16 to 20, if in a holding company where there's only one insurer and they only write business in one state, that state already has the information. So they're not going to need to file it again. So it's good for the insurer. On lines 22 and then going into page 8, if a holding company already provided the information to the Federal Reserve, let's say, for example, a bank owns an insurance company and this information was given to the Federal Reserves and I can get it from the Federal Reserves, that's where I'm going to get it. I'm not going to go make them submit it to me. Looking on to page 8, lines 9 to 13, if the holding company has already provided the information to a non-US regulator, so say someone in the UK, and it's reciprocal with us, as the European Union generally is, and I can get it from them, I'm going to get it from them. Same concept. And starting on line 15 and going to 23 and into the next page, this is a two-part exemption. If it's already filed with the state, and going on to page 9, if it's also filed with a non-US group worldwide supervisor, so a foreign entity, and they recognize our standard and they'll willingly give it to us. It's just another way where we can get this information without having to bother the company in submitting it.
Commissioner, are most companies, big companies, international now? Is that the trend? Would that be fair?
Mr. Chairman, I say there's certainly a significant number of these large holding companies that include in foreign entities. And so I'm concerned with American-based insurers in Wyoming, but you can have a U.S. company that's in a holding company over in the EU. And so, we still want to get the same information. We still need to look at the same data. So.
Thanks. I suspect that will concern people. I mean, there's increasing concern about non-domestic financial activity in the United States. I mean, it's just, and so I would suspect our members may have some concerns about that. Senator Stein's met, so if she were here, we might want to hear from her about that. But so we kind of have to think about that a little bit and maybe be able to explain how our U.S. customers and the insured are protected because these assets are pledged and available, and it's not possible for them to be siphoned off. You know, I mean, that's going to give importance to people, I think.
That's a very good point, Mr. Chairman. That's why we're doing what we're doing and why we want to do it this way. In Europe, historically, they've always looked at a bigger picture than what we have in the United States with insurance regulation. We've always looked at the states, look at the individual insurer. Well, now we're sort of blending the two a little bit together, where we're taking a more larger look at the other companies that affect that insurer. So this is protection to our American insurers and their consumers. But the realities of the world are these big companies involve reinsurance companies and other businesses that are not located in the United States. Many are, you know, are in Europe, for example.
Anybody? Senator Dockstader? Oh, I thought you were moving with the mic. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So really appreciate this discussion because I agree with the chairman. It seems to me like on these reviews, you're going to just rely on the Federal Reserve Board almost across the board. Is that not correct? And
I think if a bank's involved.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's right. If a bank, if an insurance company is part of a holding company, or if it's and the bank has control over it, or it's part of, you know, the bank's assets, they just flat out own an insurance company. In those instances, we can get that if we can get the information through the Federal Reserve, we will. Other instances, though these companies, you know, you could have a European multinational company that wants to buy a U.S. insurer, keep them domesticated in Florida, for example, and the state of Florida will have to be insured that there's sufficient funds there, and they'll get the information wherever they can. And if they can't get it through these foreign entities, they'll get it. They'll get through the insurance company. But the goal is ultimately to make sure they have enough reserves to pay claims.
thank you.
Thank you. Keep going.
Looking on lines, let's see. If there is some information on page 9, lines 11 to 18, if there is some information that a lead state commissioner wants to require, in addition to what's done, they have the opportunity to ask for it. This is not new. We do this all the time with all insurance companies. If we get quarterly financial data from our domestics, if something piques our curiosity and just doesn't quite make sense, we can ask for some more information. That's what this is doing in the holding company bill. So,
What might be an example of that?
let's say, for example, we're looking at an insurer and we just happen to notice that maybe they've gone through 2 or 3 actuaries in the last 2 or 3 years. I kind of want an explanation for that. In the back of my mind, I kind of want to know why are your professionals who are that deep into your books would leave and you'd have that turnover? Just, you know. And so, I mean, that's the one that comes to mind.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Lines 21 and then going into page 10, it also, the reverse is true. It gives a little bit of authority to the lead state commissioner to exempt certain things, to exempt pieces of information if not necessary. And I'm kind of thinking of a situation where if someone has always filed, they meet the criteria, just, you know, they've always filed and they're just over the threshold. Say the threshold's 10 billion. And maybe and there's never been a problem. And then the next year they're under 10 billion. Well, they shouldn't have to file because they didn't meet the criteria. but maybe the following year they go up again, you're like, we're not really worried about you. Either don't file or do a smaller filing of just updating some certain information. It's just an opportunity where the insurance commissioner has ability to help the insurer not have to go through all of the work necessary if they determine it's not. I haven't seen it yet because we haven't put this out there. This is still a brave new world for all of us. But that's the first place that came to my mind.
Okay.
Going to page 10. So if an insurance holding company is no longer exempt, so they don't meet those exemptions, they just basically says that in lines 7 to 14 that they're just going to have to file in the next filing date, which is the following year in March. So if you've always been exempt, but all of a sudden now you're over that threshold, you have to, we're not going to make you file right that moment. You're going to have to wait till the next filing date occurs. On line 16 to 23, this is where we're looking at the liquidity stress test. If an insurer meets the filing requirements, they must file for that specific year. That's all that is saying. And then on page 11, if an insurer meets the scope criteria for that specific year, they must file for that specific year. And industry was very specific about, we only want to have to do it when we have to do it, and it only means what it means that year. Because some of these, this is a new piece of standard that we're putting out, and it's going to be tweaked a little bit. And so last year you filed and you did okay, and it's internal. The insurance company, the insurance department is the one that looks at that information, but it's only good for that year. We kind of tweak the standards the next year. You're going to get a new. It's new, and we forget about that, and then we look at this. And so they're very cognizant of. We're only going to do this for the specific years that we have to, and it only means what it means for that specific year. Let's see. If an insurer does not meet the criteria, they don't have to file for that year. So once again, if you don't meet it, you don't file. It also gives the lead state commissioner here the authority to determine if the information is not going to be required or not needed. Sort of the same example I got before, except in this case, one's a group capital calculation, one's a liquidity stress test. I also have a little bit of ability to say, we don't need all that information for the liquidity stress test. It's just not necessary. We're not suspicious or concerned. So once again, it's something that the state commissioner has the ability to help the insurer not have to give all of the information if it's not necessary. Looking to page 12, states that the filing of the data and the result of the specific year for the liquidity stress test only applies to that specific year, like we're talking about, but that just emphasizes it. Going to page 13, we're introducing different confidentiality treatment of this information. It's more confidential. It has greater confidentiality restrictions on it. So anything involving the liquidity stress test, anything involving the group capital calculation, it's going to be treated a little bit different. And so in line 6 to 9, that's that introduction of how it's different. We're having stricter guidance, which comes down below. So in lines 11 to 18, the commissioner maintains the confidentiality of all the reported dealings with the group capital calculation. On lines 20, and then going into page 14, the commissioner maintains the confidentiality of all the information involving the liquidity stress test. Then on page 14.
And when you say confidentiality, that's with respect to the public, right? But you would share that with fellow commissioners, right?
Yes, and that will actually specifically address, because we have confidentiality agreements with with the NAIC, with all the other states. And so we could share it with them, but it is still confidential. There are certain parts in here that only we are going to maintain, and it'll touch base on the analysis
You'll
side.
point that out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So on page 14, lines 13 to 14, we're striking the term affiliates and subsidiaries and replacing it with third-party consultants designated by the commissioner. Just because that is more accurate and that's how this works. And affiliates is just so broad. Everybody has affiliates, but this is a third-party consultant designated by us. So it's very much specific to this action.
I think we had a lot of discussion about this piece in the interim.
what it means and how it, yes,
Yeah.
yes, Mr. Chairman, yes. Lines 18 to 22, any recipient of the information will agree in writing it's confidential, and whether it's a third-party consultant, whether it's, I'm trying to think if there's other vendors that might work with us on this, but everybody that touches the information is going to have a written document acknowledging confidentiality. So, Page 15, this, we're doing a lot of strikeouts of the affiliates and subsidiaries, replacing it with third-party consultants. And then that actually is also on the next page, a strikeout on lines 1 and 2. So look, on lines 5 to 10, this prohibits the NAIC, it prohibits third-party consultants from maintaining the information in a permanent database. The lead state commissioner, we are the only ones that get the analysis. We're the lead state commissioner, and they're the only ones that maintain it, the analysis. No one else does, including the NAIC, including third-party consultants. And this part was, I mean, this was, I think, important to industry, and it makes sense to me. I think it's a good provision. So, on page, let's see, page 16, lines 12 to 17. If a third-party consultant is used, we actually tell the company who they are, so they know. And they could express any concerns. For all we know, I mean, I don't know, I was trying to think of a situation where this might be a problem. Who knows, maybe they were a jilted former employee from 20 years ago. I don't know. But it helps, it helps the insurer know who's looking at their stuff. Lines 20 to 21, we're adding language that information given to a third-party consultant is confidential. And I think that is it. So on 17, it's the authorization for necessary rulemaking and an effective date.
And it's a July 1, okay?
Yes. So committee, I'd be happy to answer questions. Senator Steinmetz, I'll be happy to, if there's something that piques your curiosity that I might have touched on earlier, happy to answer it too. Anything you've got.
Thank you. Senator Dockstader.
I missed the summer intern work on third-party consultant. Slow on this. Help me understand that role.
I think what we found out, Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, I think what we found out is what's been in the Holding Company Act so far was affiliates. And that's a general term. It could be almost anybody. What's actually occurring is many states don't have expertise in this. My office does not have expertise in this. We would hire a third-party consultant to work with us. And that's the reality of how this is unfolding. And so we specify them, and then we make sure that they sign a confidentiality agreement. We also clear their name with, I mean, we give the name to the insurer, and so it's very specific.
And if you think a little bit, these are people that work for insurance commissioners or for the NAIC. And they are, when I think of affiliates, I always think of ownership arrangements, or it's a financial term. And it's not, and that's what the old confidentiality standard was, the insurance department or its affiliates. Well, they don't really have affiliates in that financial sense. It's, but that's terms been used forever. But what they do is hire consultants. And so this says, well, if you hire consultants, they are also bound by these confidentiality terms. And that's easiest for me to understand it.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that's correct, and it's fun. I mean, we, in our office, we are relying more on vendors now. We have to, just because of the complexity of this. We don't have an actuary in our office, for example. We have to hire that out. We don't have an IT expert in insurers' databases. We have to hire that out. And so this is the reality of what insurance departments are. Even the bigger insurance departments are having to do this.
And it just doesn't fit to call them affiliates.
They're really not, yes.
Yeah. Anybody else? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned that all the work that went into this with all 50 states and industry. So I'm just wondering, it seems similar to sometimes we get licensure compacts, for example, where it's sort of a take it or leave it approach when it comes to the legislation itself. So I'm wondering, do we have any room to amend this as it goes through the process without losing its effect? Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Senator Bona, it's an excellent question. We pass many model laws in the NAIC, and some of them are consumer help. Some are deal with forms or something. And the states are given quite a large number, a lot of latitude to make changes. These are accreditation standards, and accreditation standards apply to the financial examinations of insurers. So we want these uniform. In the interim, there were a couple of questions that the committee brought up, and we went back to the NAIC and we said, for one, for example, there was something, there was some verb, oh, I know what it is. In that section dealing with all of the ways you can't release the information, that was one long run-on sentence.
Yeah.
It was awful. And they said, please help us. There's got to be a better way of doing this. And so we took that back. We went to the NAIC. We looked at a couple other states. And we came up with breaking it down the way the state of Nevada did. And it just makes so much more sense. And there's other things more of, so that was okay. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, we don't want to change this. And if the committee said, we're not going to pass this unless we can change it, what we would have to do is, I would either tell you, well, then don't pass it, or I would have to take it to the NAIC and have all of we would all look at that, all the states, and would say, what's the best way of doing this? And we'd have to pass something different again as an addition or as a change. So these are the bedrock standards, these financial examination standards. We want them the same everywhere. And I know the verbiage sometimes is awkward, but that's also because that's what industry wanted. They wanted certain verbiage because it means certain things.
Doesn't the bottom line, one of the bottom lines is that we're not going to duplicate. We're trusting other insurance companies or insurance commissions and the NAIC to implement these on their domestic companies or the companies that they're responsible for. And we have to trust that. And, that's very important, and it's reciprocal as well.
Exactly, Mr. Chairman. We have approximately 1,250 insurance companies that sell products in our state. I insure I insure the exams of 4. I have to trust those other states to do it and if a state, and we look, if a state strays in a certain area, all the other states, we herd them back on track.
Okay, Senator Land?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Commissioner, I get it, the confidentiality piece. I'm just sitting here wondering if is it proprietary? Is it budgetary? What drives the care that is given on that front?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, it's the competitive edge that an insurer doesn't want to give up, or if this information was out there, other insurers would look at it and use it to their ability. It in some ways, it's like their underwriting standards. They don't want anyone to know what that is. It's an algorithm. They don't want to give it to us, and they refuse to give it to us so we can see it. They don't want their competitors to know, and that's really what it's all about. And it's also that, for us, this is a tool. It's not a black and white that, on-off switch of a button. If you get this score, it's terrible. You get this score, it's great. It's a tool for us to look to see if there's a problem. And I think, we're going to refine this in the coming years. In the next 5 or 10 years, I'm sure we're going to update this model again once we get a better feel for this portion of it. We just don't want a company, an insurance company that's a stock company, for their stock to rise or fall based on a little piece of information that could be misinterpreted by the public. And we don't want it to give a competitive edge to someone.
Anything else from the committee? Let's go to public testimony. Anybody in the audience? Marion, Catherine was, I heard from, so this is Marion Shaner, and her sister is Catherine Wilkinson, and they sometimes tag team these insurance issues. But I did hear from Catherine that she was going to be late to this meeting because her child is, the 3-year-old's going to school. She just walked in?
Yes,
You
yes.
wanted to wait for her? We can wait for her.
I'm not sure, if she, and Mr. Chairman, Mary Ann Shaner, I represent State Farm Insurance, and Catherine Wilkinson represents American Property Casualty Insurers Association. And I believe that she did submit an email to you. It is her daughter's 3rd birthday today, and she is starting a new preschool. And so she had to drop her off this morning, and due to the timing, that was her priority this morning.
But Ms. Shaner, what she did say was that they were supportive of the first Bill 50, that's this one.
That
And they
is
were
correct,
neutral on
Mr.
the next bill.
Chairman. And we stand in support as well. Accreditation is incredibly important to the insurance industry.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Shaner? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anybody online? Was there anybody else in the audience? Okay. So let's take a time out for a little housekeeping since everybody's here. Typically, a couple things about this committee that might be different than others. I've never felt it was necessary to take roll. I just, it's obvious whether we're here or not, and we're only 5 people. The second aspect of this committee is that we've traditionally never required a second for either motions or amendments. And I think that's worked well. I don't know, my Senate colleagues that have been here before can speak to that. But kind of, we're all elected, we're all big boys and girls, and we can just, if you have an idea and you want to put it on the table, we're going to respect that. So if that's acceptable to the committee, we'd just continue under those kind of ground rules. And so this is kind of the appropriate point where there's nobody online, there's nobody else in the audience, so we've heard the testimony. So I would ask committee, you've heard the testimony, what is your pleasure? And we would do that with just one person moving the bill without requiring a second. If that's acceptable, we'll continue under those. It's faster, so it's not taking roll calls faster. So committee, you've heard testimony, what is your pleasure?
I'll move.
Motion by Landon, discussion. Any discussion? Any amendments or proposed changes? I'm sorry, you guys, you're gonna love this. If you stay on this committee, you will love this stuff, and it will get, but it is really important, and it's, usually there's an insurance bill once a biennium, I think, and they tend to run like this in a lot of ways. In the past, our most active member, Senator Scott, was very, he had a great interest in insurance and worked very hard. And he seemed to take particular enjoyment in finding a particular place where he wanted to be different. And he did enjoy that. But anyway, so any proposed amendments? I don't think we need to go through page by page. I will say that it is a well-worked bill that fits within the work of other states and seeking uniformity. I can say that for all. And I see Ms. Wilkinson is coming in the door here. Happy birthday to your daughter. Ms. Wilkinson, we've completed presentation of Senate File 50. We had your partner, your sister actually explained your position on the bill of your companies. We're actually kind of almost ready to vote, but if you had anything you wanted to say? You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, committee, if there's nothing further, why don't we call the roll on Senate File 50?
This is roll call for Senate File 50. Senator Boner.
Aye.
Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Aye, thank you very much. It's kind of a nice way to start corporations. Did you guys decide? So Senator Landon will be carrying that on the floor, and we'll look forward to help. It could come up as early as tomorrow, would be my estimate. They'll need bills in committee of the whole, and as a matter of fact, I think tomorrow I'm in the chair on committee of the whole if it were to happen, so it's good that Landon will be there. All right, come on back up. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 52. Just by way of time constraints, we're going to try to adjourn at 9:45 so that we can get in place for the state of the state.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Jeff Rude, once again, Commissioner of Insurance, along with my deputy, Tana Howard. She'll introduce the next bill and go through it and please ask questions as necessary.
Ms.
Mr.
Howard,
Chairman.
welcome.
Thank you. Tana Howard, Deputy Commissioner of Insurance. Are you ready for the easy one? The last one was hard. This one's going to be hopefully quick.
Note that I'm carrying the hard one.
Let the record
So
reflect.
noted.
Right. Okay, this is Senate File 52, Insurance Amendments, or as internally we call this at the Insurance Department, our cleanup bill. We often bring a insurance cleanup bill to this committee every few years. Internally, we keep a list of just problems or things that need updated or tweaked in our code, and this is what this bill is. So there shouldn't be anything controversial. We have worked with industry on this bill and brought this bill to the Corporations Committee in the interim, and it's just some updates. So getting into it on page 2, this is we are clarifying the definition of an insurance transaction. We are not changing the definitions. We currently have a definition of insurance transaction within the code, but currently the insurance transaction definition is only linked to a specific term, which is in support of insurance support organizations. And it's a question we get from insurers often of what's an insurance transaction? We do have a definition further in the code, and the bill references it for transact and in terms of the business of insurance. And that's the definition that we generally use. We use the term insurance transaction over a dozen times in our code, and we often get questions from insurers, what does that mean? So what this is doing is just reorganizing and clarifying what an insurance transaction is. So it's saying, for the purposes of the insurance support organizations, where it references that long paragraph, it means an insurance transaction. And then we've added on page 3, the subsection B of saying any other time, we're really referring to transacts, which is that triple X and the definition of transacts with the respect to the business of insurance. So again, we're not changing a definition here. We're just clarifying and reorganizing a little bit. Moving on to the middle of page 3, you're going to see this a lot, and this is what makes the bill maybe a little bit longer, but I swear it's simple, is we are striking out the term original to the certificate of authority. So insurance companies have to be licensed in our state, as we've talked about previously. When we license them, we give them a certificate of authority, and it's actually a hard physical copy. And we're just trying to update this to not require a hard physical copy of a certificate of authority. They can still request it. Nothing changes with how we're licensing these companies. Right now, we issue them a hard physical copy, and actually, we deem this a property of the insurance department. And if they ever leave our insurance, leave our state, or they make a change to their license, they're required to actually physically send that copy back to the insurance department. It's really not needed. Every insurance company can be verified online or by calling our insurance department. And again, if they want a hard copy, they can get it. So a lot of this bill is going to be striking original. And that is on page.
Senator Lannon has a question.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry if this is simple, elementary kind of a question, but are these the certificates you might see on walls in insurance offices? And so basically, you're just saying you're going to have to print your own. Isn't that what we're doing here?
Ms. Howard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Leonard, yes, in fact, that's a great point. A couple years ago, we had a very similar cleanup insurance bill, and we removed that requirement for agents. So the agents were required to have a physical copy of their license in an office, and we removed that requirement because insurance agents, this is removing this requirement for the companies themselves, not the agents, because we've already removed that. So this is a further update to the companies themselves.
Thank you.
I think you asked that question in the interim.
I probably.
I think you did.
And by the way, what did I have for breakfast?
No, it's an excellent point to make. You know what, it could have been the interim 2 years ago when we did the agents bill. So anyway, Ms. Howard, please.
Okay, carrying on to page 4, again, we are striking the term original within line 2 of page 4, and then again in 26.3.112 on that line 12. Carrying on to page 5, again, on line 8, there is a strike of original for that hard copy. And then we're adding a subsection. So this is, again, talking about the licensure of insurance companies. We're adding the subsection E. What this requires is for insurance companies to provide their contact information. We require every entity that we license at the Department of Insurance to give us their contact information so we can contact them, the agents themselves, other licensees. For some reason, we've never updated this for insurance companies. And as you would suspect, when we get a complaint for an insurance company, or we have any legal issue or anything we need to work through, an insurance exam, as Commissioner Rude at the previous bill talked about, we need to be able to contact them. So it's important that the insurance company has updated information. And that's what this is requiring. This is not, it's very standard for every state. We're one of the only states who actually doesn't have this requirement. So it's just bringing them into compliance, saying, hey, if you change your information within 30 days, we need to know what that information is.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's my understanding this is a current practice. Do you get any resistance, folks saying, no, I don't have to do this? What would they be any material difference at all if we put this into law with this?
Ms. Howard.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner. So right now, insurance companies don't have that requirement. That's why we're adding this. So what happens right now that we're experiencing is we get a complaint from one of your constituents, and we need to reach out to that insurance company to get some claim file notes or to get a response from them, and they haven't updated their information. So it delays the complaint process for your constituents to try to resolve these issues, because we're trying to go through records that to find a current contact information for that insurer. So by requiring them to update their contact information, it's going to speed up the process. What I was referring to previously is the other licenses that we do have, like for the agents or for agencies or third-party administrators, they all currently already have this requirement in the code saying you have to update your contact information within 30 days. This is just also requiring this for insurance companies themselves.
Good. Keep
Okay.
going.
At the bottom of page 5, we are updating the term registered mail to certified mail. This is a service of process, so insurance companies are required to deem the commissioner, basically their person if they get sued. We have to, if anything happens to an insurance company, we as an insurance department and a regulatory agency need to know what's happening. So they send us this documentation. It's a legal documentation back and forth. And right now we have specific timeframes for those. Right now, we're required to send those registered mail. It's a legal document. There's nothing of value that we're sending. Certified mail is probably the more appropriate type of mail. So that's why we're trying to update this from registered to certified.
Deputy Commissioner, would you explain the difference? Because sometimes we forget.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I it's been a long time since I've sent anything registered mail, but per the United Postal Service and the research that I've done, so registered mail is a highly secure type of mail, right? It includes insurance, so it would include if you were sending something of value, it would protect that of what you're sending. And it still has that receipt, right? Read receipt and everything. The same as certified mail. The real difference between certified mail and registered mail is this value requirement. But they still are both very secure. They still have what we are sending for the legal documents, and what we're required and what we really need is that receipt confirmation that they received it, that the insurance company received it. We're not insuring anything.
So both of them require a receipt upon a delivery,
Yes,
or a
sir.
signature upon delivery. Thank you.
Continuing on to page 6, talking about our cleanup bill from a couple years ago, we made, it was generally a licensing cleanup bill related to insurance agents. And this is kind of an oops. We're correcting what we forgot. We had 2 terms in 26-9 to 16 where we updated the entire chapter 9 from producer to licensee. This is just an updated term. Means the same thing. It's just a more standard updated practice. And so we forgot 2 of those. So we're just updating that, striking producer and adding licensee. If that makes sense. Continuing on to page 7, again, these are two strikeouts of original for that certificate of authority, just not requiring that hard copy. Continuing on to page 8, in the 269210, the bottom, we're striking this last sentence here, lines 17 through 19. Again, this talks about the hard copy of the certificate of authority, that we're no longer requiring that hard copy. Again, they can request it, nothing changes, it's just removing that requirement. Continuing on to page 9, this is a clarification that we have been working with industry, that industry also brought to us, that we run into. It's a clarification within the scope of our 2635 201, which deals with our cancellation and non-renewal of policies. We're striking this last line between 4 and 5 here, referencing 2615 119. So cancellation and non-renewal, so cancellation for policies, insurance companies have certain timelines they have to meet. They have to send information within 45 days. What this says is 2615 119 refers to temporary insurance. So if you go and get an auto policy today, they're likely going to give you a temporary insurance card where it's only good for, maybe 30 days, right? If an insurance company has a requirement to send you a cancellation and notice within 45 days, but your insurance card or temporary policy is only 30 days, it's an impossible standard. And so this is something insurance companies brought to us saying, we can't provide 45-day notice if it's a temporary insurance contract. So nothing is changing for the code or those notifications. It's just saying, it's common sense, temporary insurance wouldn't be necessarily included in those cancellation and non-renewal requirements. And that's just clarifying within the code. The actual statute, if you go into it further, also talks about that, but this is just clarifying within that scope. Lastly, we have a couple of repeals. The first repeal is 263113C, and this is exactly what I was talking about before, where the insurance companies are required to physically mail that certificate of authority back to the insurance department. So it's repealing that requirement because we're not going to send them a hard physical copy of their certificate of authority, so there's no need for them to mail it back. The other repeals here are within our health chapters, 2618 103 AIX and 2619 107 AXVII. This was brought to us by our only domestic health insurer as a recommendation, and I would say that it's language we agreed on. It's outdated language. What this is, and if you look it up, it looks very long, so don't be afraid. It's repealing a disclosure. So right now, we require health insurers to provide a disclosure if they provide wellness benefits in their policy. This law was written prior to the Affordable Care Act, prior to really when wellness benefits, so those benefits that aren't subject to deductible, weren't very common. So we wanted to advertise that. And the legislature passed this saying, hey, bright, bold letters on the very first page of your insurance policy saying this policy may contain wellness benefits. We are the only state who requires this, and it causes tons of questions from insurers, questions from consumers. Why is this on my policy? What does this mean? So we're removing this disclosure on the policies. Again, nothing is changing. Wellness benefits are pretty standard nowadays in insurance policies, and it is still required within our law for these insurers to list the benefits within the contract. So nothing changes there. It's just that disclosure, and we're removing that. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Good job. Questions for Ms. Howard? Deputy Commissioner Howard? Any questions? Thank you. Let's see if we got any testimony from the room. I'm not seeing anybody that wants to speak on the bill in the room. Is there anybody on Zoom? No. All right. This one's pretty controversial. I'm kind of upset about those original certificates, actually. Anyway, committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure? Got a motion by Boner. Discussion. So it seems pretty straightforward cleanup. I want to ask companies why they're neutral and not supporting this, but anyway, I suppose that's a backstory. Anyway, but basically your positions are neutral, if I understand right. Okay. Discussion, anybody? All right, let's call the roll on this one.
Senator Boner. Aye. Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz. Aye. Chairman Case.
Aye. Looks like that one squeaked through. So we've got floor management handled for that, and just heads up to the committee, we will start working bills in the corporate area within the Secretary of State's office on Friday. I think we'll still start at 8 o'clock on Friday, if that's all right. If we don't finish all those bills, we'll carry over to Monday. But we're good with the Secretary of State's office, right? Ms. Sharp, you contacted them, or?
I have not, but I will.
Okay. I saw them last night. I did mention it to a couple of them, so. I think they'll be excited that we're taking up their bills, and most of them are products of joint interim collaboration, so in fact, they all are, so it's should be a nice working relationship there. So with that, we'll stand adjourned until 8 a.m. on Friday. Thank you very much. Don't forget to stay the state.